I only need 4 because I'm presenting, right?
All presented.
Indeed,
If you're presenting, you'll need 4.
I have presenting, you need 4.
Anyone have any issues?
I
I only got 4. I'm sorry.
You've got 4, but I like totally miscount. Now, Katie, how many do you have?
I think one more person.
How many?
No, for me, no, I have 5.
I must have miscounted. Okay,
Yeah, one more person came in.
again?
One more person came in.
Yeah, we have 10 now. So
Yeah, it was Katie. Okay, in that case, maybe just on the side of the scores, put another person's name in and say, here's, so you can just,
You want another one? Yeah, one more.
there you go.
sure.
How you doing in time? You doing good?
Yeah.
Is it recording? It's recording to the cloud. Okay, so we'll do the same thing again. We'll go through our 5 and get going. I'll do the same feedback and then we'll start with the final presentation. So it won't be today, but probably tomorrow. Yeah, it might be today. I'll give you the feedback, upload the videos, and then give you a few more instructions. And then for the final presentations, we're gonna use the 3 weeks. We're gonna do 2, 3, and 4. I think we'll do that. But someone's gonna draw the short straw to do first round. But it'll be more or less in the order of how we've done them. Just use the laptop forwards and backwards. We're going through there. I think we are pretty close. We're underway. So first up, I will do. So that should just advance arrows. Okay, cool. Just give me 1 sec and I will. More clear. And the timing. Very sleepy friend. Okay. Anytime.
So when I say the word shark, a lot of people probably think of something like this, or maybe something super scary like this, or maybe even super powerful like this. And these are all accurate depictions of sharks, but a lot of these photos only show one species. It makes them look super scary. It doesn't really paint an accurate picture of the population as a whole. So in actuality, there are over 400 species of sharks. This is actually showing only a small fraction of those. And sharks are actually considered one of the oldest species on our planet. They've been around for 450 million years, longer than the dinosaurs, and they're also some of the oldest living individuals. Some of them can live almost 300 years. So they have no natural predators, but they're still on the decline. And so today I'm going to talk to you about what's happening to them, the causes of these, and how sharks affect our ecosystems, our health, and the economy. And then to finish up, I'm going to talk about the importance of changing our attitudes regarding sharks and how this can help with their decline. So this graph is showing how 8 popular species of sharks have declined since the 1970s. And if you see, some of them have declined up to 99%. And so since the 1970s, there has been a 70% decline in all shark species around the world. And today there are 143 species out of the approximate 400 that are listed as federally endangered. And each year humans kill about 100 million sharks. So there's 3 major causes of the declines of sharks. The first one is bycatch. The second one is overfishing. And the third one is shark finning. So the first one I'm going to talk about is bycatch. So bycatch is defined as the unintentional capture of a species. So someone's out catching shrimp or fishing for salmon and they accidentally catch sharks, that is considered bycatch. Data on bycatch is very hard to calculate and determine because it's not super reported, because it's illegal, so people underreport or don't report at all. But our most recent data suggests that 12 million sharks are captured through bycatch each year. And the 3 main ways that they're caught through bycatch is through long lines, gill nets, and trolling. So the first way that they're caught through bycatch is through long lining, and this picture is showing what long lining looks like. So long lining is miles and miles of fishing line with thousands of hooks behind a boat. So as you can see, it captures a lot of different species, not only the target fish that they're fishing for, but also things like sharks. And this is showing the average annual shark bycatch of long lining by country. So as you can see, it accounts for tens of thousands of sharks caught each year. The next way is through gill nets. And so these nets are laid out across the ocean and they trap sharks, they get stuck in their gills and then they can't swim, so they can't breathe, so then they die. And then the third way is trolling. This is when a big net is dragged behind a boat. This kills the most amount of sharks each year. So this is showing the bycatch distribution of fishing gear, and as you can see, trolling captures more sharks than all the other fishing methods combined. The next cause of their decline is overfishing. So overfishing is catching sharks over the legal limit that you're allowed. So why this is particularly dangerous is because sharks experience slow growth, late sexual maturity, and they have few young per brood. So it takes a long time for their populations to recover from overfishing. Overfishing is also illegal, which contributes to the data being hard to capture and hard to quantify. And the main cause of overfishing is due to an unsustainable demand for meat, particularly their fins. So that's what I'm going to talk about next. The third and the main reason for their decline is shark finning. So shark finning is the capture of sharks, and most times they catch them while they're alive, bring them on board, slice off their fins, and then throw their bodies back into the ocean. This causes them to die like slow deaths because they can't swim, so they either bleed out or suffocate. When they do this, they bring them on board, only cut off the fins that are shown here. So 98% of the shark weight is wasted. And then this is showing how they are just dumped back into the ocean and they're found without their fins. This figure is showing the most common or the most places where most sharks are finned. So if you notice, it's mostly in China and Hong Kong, and that is due to their demand for shark fin soup. Shark finning is illegal in the United States, but as you can see, the United States still participates in it. It was outlawed in the year 2000, but the trade is still legal in all but 12 states, and so people are still catching them and trading them illegally. So this is the shark fin soup, which is the main driver in the capture of shark fins. It's seen as a delicacy in China, a symbol of status, a symbol of welcome. And so why should we care about this? So sharks provide a lot of ecosystem services, and this has a lot of effects on humans. So the first ecosystem service is that sharks balance food webs. They help keep populations in control. They help make sure one species doesn't overpopulate and outcompete the others. The second reason is that sharks keep populations healthy. They eat the sick individuals, the dying individuals, the injured ones. This helps get rid of the weak individuals and helps promote evolution of healthy populations. And third, they keep habitats healthy, particularly by feeding on things like sea turtles who graze on seagrass. They're able to keep the seagrass populations up because they're keeping the sea turtle populations down. And this also has important consequences on global climate change, because if we get rid of sharks, then we're gonna have lots of sea turtles. They're gonna overgraze the seabeds, and those seabeds with seagrass serve as carbon sinks. From an economic standpoint, sharks bring in $304 million every year through tourism and shark interactions. Shark tourism directly provides 10,000 jobs annually. Compare that to the price of fins from one shark is about $100. So it's much more economically profitable to keep them alive. They're worth a lot more alive due to tourism and things than they are dead. And this is just showing in Florida alone, in 2016, the shark industry was worth $221 million, where all of the shark fins combined were only worth $1 million. And so a big reason why people don't really care about this, or there's a lot of dangerous behaviors, is because of these fears of sharks. People are really scared that you're gonna get attacked by sharks. Sharks are dangerous, they're mean, when in actuality, that's not very accurate. So since 1580, there's been less than 3,000 shark attacks reported, so in a span of 500 years. Your odds of dying in a shark attack are 1 in almost 4 million. And so the fears of shark attacks are usually way blown out of proportion. And so studies show that 51% of all Americans are, quote, absolutely terrified of sharks. This leads to dangerous behaviors such as this Instagram photo, where you can see this fisherman or fisherwoman is claiming to be keeping the water safe by removing the sharks. A big way we can change these attitudes surrounding sharks is through education. So educating children, education in schools, shark interactions, learning about what sharks do for our ecosystem helps promote their respect, and demanding change from organizations like Project Aware and Shark Trust, who work to stop the fin trade and develop legislation. And so we need to stop behaviors like this and things like this and recognize the importance of sharks, and that the way to keep the water safe is actually to have more sharks, not less.
Cool, thanks, Jan. 9 minutes and 4 seconds. That's a very good timing. Give you all a second to I like the way they calculate probability. 1 in 3,748,000 and 67. All right, Professor Fortino, you're up next. Anytime.
Howdy, y'all. So, okay, my name is Ryan Fortino, and today I will be talking about population and food. So, to start, what do we know about this? Well, the population isn't done growing, and food hunger around the world is already an issue, with food being hard to come by in some places. So this graph by the UN really does a good job of showing exactly that, how population and just, well, it's in 2021 now, so we're about at 8.3 billion people, so a little bit ahead of this. And by 2100, we'll be at another, about a third of our population added on. So major population growth. So, and before I go much further, I want to make sure that everyone understands the difference between malnutrition and the other types of, like the types of malnutrition. So typically when people hear undernutrition, they just think of, oh, that's malnutrition and it's interchangeable. But in reality, macronutrient related malnutrition is a lack of essential vitamins and minerals. And then you have overnutrition, which is caloric excess. And then you have undernutrition, which is a caloric deficit. And overnutrition and undernutrition can go in relation with macronutrient related issues. And they all have major health implications. But today I'll be mainly focusing on undernutrition. So why is this important? Quality food is essential to high quality life, and I think everyone kind of gets that. But undernutrition is linked to a wide range of ailments, and it particularly affects children, since children are the youngest and they need the nutrients to have a healthy life long term. Without them, they can lead to long-term effects such as fat accumulation, and then asthma, anemia, and just insulin resistance, and a lot of other things that aren't good for the long-term success of a child or in general. So I'll be talking about a few things. The three main things I'll be talking about today is, who will be most affected, what are the ways to combat hunger, and then potential unintended consequences of decreasing hunger around the world with a growing population. So first, who will be most affected? Well, Africa already has 1 in 4 people struggling with hunger annually, and this is going down from 1 in 3, which was, I think, the number in 2010. And the population is expected to double by 2050. And sub-Saharan Africa is likely to be the one hit hardest by population growth. So if anyone's not familiar with what I'm talking about, the Sahara Desert is right at the top, and below that is where it's expected to be hit the hardest. So to kind of showcase this, I have population graphs of, or population pyramids of the 4 largest countries in Africa. And it's Ethiopia, the DRC, Egypt, and Nigeria. So as you can see, all the population pyramids have a really strong bottom base, and that just shows how the population is going to expand or grow rapidly as the populations in those younger ages become older. And as reference, I have Japan and the United States, and you can see how Japan has a very small base, and that shows that the population is shrinking, while the United States has kind of a pretty stable base, and that's why we have a relatively stable population. So on to current ways of dealing with food shortages. So our current way of dealing with food shortages is mainly imports. And there's some issues with that. So it depends on other regions, and it relies on the economic power of importers. So let's say if your country doesn't have much power, they will like economic power, then they have trouble bringing in the food to really supply the population and really fix food shortages issues. So that results in imports being useful for overcoming local limits on the short scale. So let's say catastrophe comes in and you need to feed your population. Well, imports are great for that, but long term, not so much. So how do we increase food security? Well, there's 5 main ways that we do that. So there's technological innovation, improved seed varieties, sustainable fertilizer usage, improved irrigation, and soil regeneration. So technological innovation, there's a lot of them, but the 3 I want to talk about really quickly is vertical farming, which is using less land area, so you grow your food vertically instead, like in buildings. Food efficiency, so as some of y'all might know, a lot of the food in grocery stores, almost 1/3 goes to waste normally. And so by cutting down on that, you're able to use more food for more people, and you have less waste, and that increases food efficiency. And then alternative protein sources. So that can be like a vegan lifestyle or vegetarian lifestyle, to where you're accessing proteins from plants, or in future, I know there's a lot of work being done on 3D printing meats and to also supplement the alternative protein issues. For improved seed varieties, you have drought resistance, nutritional value, and larger yields. And this can be accomplished through GMOs, or just in general, there's many varieties. So like, think for an apple per se, there's many different types of apples, and some of them have different benefits with their growing. And like nutritional value, you have, this is a GMO, this is golden rice, which many of y'all probably know of, but it's fortified with vitamin A. And stuff like that is what we need, and that will typically target the micronutrient related malnutrition. So, and then we have sustainable fertilizer usage. So this is a balance between benefit to agriculture, but also not costing the environment as much with fertilizer usage. So best management practices are what would be used here. And the goal is to really keep fertilizer out of the waterways to prevent eutrophication, which results in fish kills. And so the best management practices is match the fertilizer with the plant. So whatever it's lacking, try not to use fertilizers when you're expecting rainfall or with watering, and then contain effluent to make sure that it doesn't enter waterways if it does end up getting mixed. And then improved irrigation systems allow for larger scale facilities and farming operations and better water use efficiency. So in this photo, you see drip irrigation, which is a good one. And there's some other ones, but basically a lot of the farms in, I'll target sub-Saharan Africa, are local and kind of like family farms. They don't really have large farming facilities, but with larger farming facilities, you can feed the population more easily, which is useful when treating the population. So, and then soil regeneration. There's a lot of different ways to do that, but what I really want to talk about is biochar, because there was a study in 2019 that targeted just that. And if you're not familiar with biochar, what biochar is a type of charcoal that is formed through pyrolysis and the absence of oxygen. And pyrolysis is just decomposition with heat, so it's nothing too crazy. And so basically adding biochar to soils, you increase the organic carbon content, and that can make poor soils more nutrient rich. And so the study in Burkina Faso, which is a country located in West Africa, did exactly that. And they found massive increases in the amount of biomass, from anywhere between 70% of an increase over 600% of an increase. So that just showed like right there that this has potential to be a way to regenerate soil. And then unintended consequences. So this will be the third thing I'll talk about. So food production, of course, increased food production, of course, will take more resources. And with that, we have some direct consequences, which is deforestation, habitat loss, and decreased biodiversity, in addition to increased greenhouse gases. And these are just the direct things. So little, like some people wouldn't know, but greenhouse gases actually decrease cereal yields, which is a major food staple in a lot of parts of the world. And that's just something that many people wouldn't know. But there's one thing that we've become very accustomed to over the last year as a result, and that is zoonotic disease. So indirectly, cutting down all the trees, cutting down forests and decreasing biodiversity will result in zoonotic disease. And that's a disease that can be transmitted between people and animals and vice versa. And so forests act as a kind of protective barrier between that. And a study that was done in Borneo, which is an island in Malaysia, found that when more forests were cut down and deforestation occurred, the rates of malaria cases increased in the region in addition to Zika. And so basically with that, you have, and there's other diseases like that, because with forest, they provide a barrier by reducing the amount of interactions people have with wild animals, and also biodiversity has more animals available for the diseases to go through them and have less likely to transmit to a person. And so this graph really, this image kind of shows that vector-borne diseases is one of the more, who is tied more to this, and proximity or direct animal contact is two of the main two things. But that being said, we can't not grow food. So we have to be able to feed the population. So basically what this is saying is that we need to make sure we do it in a sustainable way to prevent the worst case scenario of more zoonotic diseases and biodiversity loss and all the stuff that comes along with it. So is there a plan? Well, actually there is a plan. So the United Nations probably has the most detailed plan out of everything, and it's a combination of 193 countries that have signed onto it. And their goal number 2 is to end hunger, achieve food security, improve nutrition, and promote sustainable agriculture. And so their targets include, ending hunger by 2030, focusing on all the types of malnutrition after they get through that, focus on improved seed varieties and keeping biodiversity, having acceptable measures. And they also focus on a lot of things with the market. So they don't want there to be, extreme demand and short supply, and then there'd be inflation in the prices of food. They want to make sure that it's a stable thing that everyone can get access to the food they need to achieve a sustainable, like a healthy lifestyle. So in conclusion, I talked about the main things, and the real key takeaway here is that food is something that we're going to need with our growing population, and if it's done sustainably, we'll be fine for the most part. But if we do it without sustainable measures, we could still have major issues going forward. So I talked about who will be most affected, which is sub-Saharan Africa, the ways to combat hunger, so the current methods and what needs to change for long-term food security, and then potential unintended consequences, which is direct consequences and indirect consequences. And those are the 3 main things. So these are all the things I talked about, and are there any questions on any of it? No? Okay. And I have references and then.
Okay, cool. 10 minutes and 56 seconds. 0.62. Ryan, excellent. I'll give you all a chance to digest that, so to speak. We are good. All right, Kellen, you're up. You're in.
Cool. Like Dr. Sai said, my name is Kellen Schaub, and I'm going to be presenting on universal waste today. So universal waste is a subcategory of hazardous waste. Universal waste is something that a lot of people have not heard about, but it's something that we interact with on a daily basis. And There's actually a lot of it in this room right now. So before I get started, a little bit of an overview about what I'm going to be talking to you guys about. I'm going to obviously talk to you about what universal waste is. Then I'm going to go into the importance, the governance of it, how we should dispose of it and treat it, and then a little bit about the life cycle of universal waste. So to begin, widely generated hazardous waste is known as universal waste. So under the governance, there's 5 categories of universal waste: batteries, pesticides, light bulbs, aerosols, and mercury containing materials. So you may be thinking, what are mercury containing materials? Those are going to be thermostats and thermometers and any functioning items that contain mercury in order to provide that function. So thermostats and thermometers both nowadays not as much, but in the past have used mercury in order to function. So obviously, like I said, universal waste are a subcategory of hazardous waste. Therefore, they are going to be potentially harmful to the environment and to people. Therefore, they're extremely important. So for commercial and industrial generators of universal waste, they must use these universal waste tags on all of their generation of any of the 5 subcategories for the treatment, disposal, and transportation of these materials. Now, for us, more applicable in household and residential generation, we don't have to use these tags, but we do need to be careful and pay close attention to what we should do with these universal wastes. So like I said, universal wastes are dangerous. So I'm going to kind of go through each one and talk about the potential impacts that they have and why we should care about disposing of them correctly. So as you see on this left photo, clearly that surface water is not normal. It's very contaminated. So batteries, light bulbs, pesticides, they all, pesticides don't, but batteries and light bulbs contain metals and other contaminants. And so say, for example, you throw your light bulbs or batteries in your household garbage can, they then get taken away and they go to your local landfill. And the landfill, they get crushed and broken. And then those metals that are then now crushed leach into the soil, which can leach into the groundwater and then move wherever that groundwater is going, and eventually can end up in surface waters like these. This surface water is leached with lead, zinc, and a couple other metals. This picture in the middle is a young gentleman with Minamata disease. You probably know what that is, but Minamata disease is the result of mercury poisoning. And so mercury containing materials, similar to what I said about the light bulbs and batteries, if you put that stuff in your household garbage can, they get transported to the landfill, they get crushed, broken, that mercury leaches into the soil, groundwater, and then mercury is known to bioaccumulate within the aquatic food chain. So then fish start consuming it, and then we eventually consume them, and that is a potential result of a large accumulation of mercury. And then finally, over on the right, that doesn't apply to any one of the 5 subcategories, but it's a good representation of what can happen if we don't dispose and treat of the universal waste properly. Most of them, if you send them to a landfill or recycling facility where they don't belong, the metals or contaminants will end up in water, and water is a pathway to many different places, plants, microbes, fish, wherever it may be, and then it can eventually come back to us and harm us. So like I said, they're dangerous. And so because they're dangerous, the United States government does govern universal waste. So universal waste are included in the United States Code of Federal Regulations in 40 CFR 273. So as you can see on that photograph on the right, those are the 5 subcategories of universal waste in the code. And then if you were to keep scrolling underneath them, it goes through how to handle, transport, dispose, and treat each of the 5 universal wastes. Now, maybe thinking this governance is for commercial and industrial users, and it is. It's for large scale generators because the accumulation is a lot more harmful than our single light bulb we might take out at our house. But it is important for us as users and generators of those things to know that it is governed, and it is important to follow some of these steps to treat and dispose of them properly. So with all that being said, what is our job? Our job is to dispose of them properly, which hopefully many of us are doing, and if we're not, we can start doing. So on the left, this is a hazardous waste collection facility. So your mercury containing materials, your pesticides, and your light bulbs can all be taken to these facilities. These are often put on by your local municipalities, and they usually occur about once a month, but they will collect all of your waste that you have, and they will treat it and move it to wherever it needs to be. Now, batteries are a little different. You guys may have seen these little boxes that organizations sponsor and will put out. I know there's plenty throughout TCU and grocery stores and different supply stores where you can drop your batteries off. But these organizations will collect your batteries and then take them to the treatment facilities that they belong. And then aerosols, finally, aerosols are a little bit different. So if aerosols are completely empty, as in there's no more residue or any sort of aerosol within the can, they can be disposed of in your household recycling bin. But if there's any bit left, you kind of have two options. The first is you can donate to some organizations will collect unused aerosols that are still usable and try and redistribute them to finish their life. And then secondly, they can also be taken to a hazardous waste collection facility and they will handle it from there. So with that being said, I also think it's important for us to understand the treatment of these so that when we go to just throw away a light bulb or an aerosol can in our garbage can at home, we really think about where it's actually going and where it should be going. So to begin with batteries, when they're treated, they're extremely reusable and recyclable. Batteries can basically be taken down to their raw parts and be reused. Most batteries are mostly made up of metals. And so they get sent to scrap metal facilities and they can be reused as batteries, golf clubs, silverware. Those are actually the top 3 things that batteries are used for. Pesticides. So pesticides are definitely the most costly process out of the universal waste to treat. So the goal for many of these collection facilities with pesticides is to redistribute them to people that can use them. But if they're not able to, they get sent to this incineration process. They're inputted as nitrogen, phosphorus, go through extreme heat, and then they're released as H2O, carbon dioxide, and sulfur dioxide. Now, these pesticides or this incineration process does create ash as a byproduct, which isn't the best, but it is better than releasing fertilizers and pesticides out where we don't want them in our water sources. Moving on to light bulbs and mercury containing materials. Now, I've grouped these together because they go through similar processes. As you can see on the right, that is actually a household glass crusher. So it's a simplistic form. This complex diagram is actually what happens. Don't worry about understanding the diagram, but the gist of what is happening here is these things get collected by these facilities. They basically go through these big crushers and they get separated through multiple screening processes into each of their raw elements. They get separated into metals, glasses, mercury, and other wirings or pieces that they have. And then after they go through these screening processes, they then get redistributed where they belong, either at scrap metal facilities or glass facilities, and they're able to be reused as new glass or new metal. And mercury is also able to be reused as well. And finally, aerosols, like I said, if they're empty, they're okay to be recycled. But if they're not empty, they are going to have to go to the hazardous waste collection facility in which they'll puncture them so they're no longer an explosive hazard. And then once they're punctured, they'll get sent to a vapor and liquid safe place to be dismantled. And so they're not leaking or leaking liquids or aerosols into air and potentially contaminating them. With that said, I think it's also important for the life cycle of each of these things to be known. I'm not going to go through each one, but I think a light bulb is a very good example for us to understand that most everything we use on a day-to-day basis and we throw in the garbage can be reused, and oftentimes it is. So for the light bulb, like I said, it goes through the crushing process, the separation process, and then each of those things is able to be recycled. Now, that's not just for light bulbs, that goes for each of the 5 universal wastes. It also goes for many other things we use on a day-to-day basis. So I think understanding that life cycle will help us to remember to place these things where they belong. So with that being said, universal wastes are extremely important to the future health of the environment as well as us as people. Aerosols were actually just recently added to the universal waste list, as it used to be 4 and now it is 5 subcategories. And I can only guess that as we continue to develop and increase our population, there's going to be more hazardous wastes that are added to that list to be more rapidly treated so that we do not end up with large piles of hazardous waste that we are using frequently. With that said, those are my photographic references, my information references. I'd love to answer any questions that you guys may have. Cool, thank you.
Those questions will come in due time. 10 minutes and 40.
Thank you.
Awesome. Gloria, I think you are something next. Well, I just booked a trip to Hawaii next month,
Oh, did you?
so I'm gonna pay attention here.
Oh, no.
Not that I wasn't gonna pay attention.
Right. Yeah, my friend lives there.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I'm going to Hawaii. Okay, anytime, you're up.
Oh, well, I'm Gloria Serrano, and I'm just gonna be discussing some of the characteristics of vetiver grass and how it is helping to combat some of the environmental issues we're seeing in Hawaii. Now, erosion is the process by which sediment is transferred from one place to another. Now, this can be done through several processes, as you can see, rivers, winds, glaciers. But what we're going to be focused on are waves and landslide erosion, specifically how this can negatively impact the environment. You have this sediment that is being transferred from one place to another. All these nutrients and resources are now being displaced and put somewhere that typically this material doesn't need to be, and it has a lot of harmful effects. As far as the effects on animals, you can see here, heavy precipitation will carry all these resources down the island through to the beaches and then onto the oceans. See here how habitat is obviously being destroyed and a lot of resources that those animals would typically have are now gone. Again, this is washing away perhaps nests of various endangered species like the hawksbill sea turtle. Then also there's migration patterns that happen with these turtles. They come up to the beach to nest, and unfortunately, year after year, they're coming up to the beach and not finding their original nesting habitats. Again, the sediment is carrying through to the oceans, destroying coral reef habitats and the species that are within those habitats. This also, again, affects humans. Here you can see waves are crashing into right here is Waikiki Coast. So tourists are normally used to coming to Hawaii so they can enjoy the beach, which is obviously not the case in this situation. And this can start causing damages to hotels and various property, which affects ecotourism. Now, again, this also affects residents, not just the economy. So you see obstruction of roadways, vehicles that were in the path of the landslide, and various homes and properties. Again, all negatively impacting humans. In Hawaii, there is legislation that is called the 20-foot rule. Hawaii won't step in on any kind of erosion damages until it is 20 feet within your property. This causes some misconceptions. One of them being that erosion isn't a problem until it's 20 feet within 20 feet of your property. This is obviously not true. Sediment is carried great distances in short amounts of time, and erosion is something to definitely be concerned about. Another thing that this causes is for humans to be more reactive rather than proactive about this issue. So some of the reactive solutions are sandbags as boundaries from the property to protect against the waves. You also have concrete barriers that are formed, and then sand is placed on top of those. Clearly, these are just not aesthetically pleasing, and then again, this is just a Band-Aid solution. It's not a permanent solution to the problem. Some other solutions are rehabilitating or restoring the habitat. So you're recreating the sand dunes and establishing a solid vegetation and root systems in order to hold this sediment in place. So that's what we're going to get into is the vetiver grass. This specific grass is quickly grows. It has root systems that can reach up to 15 feet. So it's very strong and holds sediment in place. As you can see, if a high precipitation situation were to occur, this plant can filter through the sediment and allows the water to drain naturally. But the sediment stays in place where it would need it to be. This plant specifically has various properties that remove toxins from the soil. You also have various carbon sequestering properties as well. All of these really help to positively impact the environment. Here, as you can see, that hawksbill nest is able to thrive. Coral reefs are able to rebalance and sustain life. You also have, excuse me, the reinstilling of black power into the citizens because now they're able to learn about erosion and combat it on their own through natural means. Then you have tourism that's still in place because beaches are still able to thrive. And then you have various endangered species that are now thriving as well, all working to form this community of helping to save the environment and educating both natives and tourists of the island. Now this extends to, on a global perspective, various programs are in place to combat various environmental systems that are negatively impacting the environment, such as pollution and things along that line. So now we are educating people and instilling these programs, and now are able to see how vetiver grass can positively impact in many ways. Any questions? And my references. That's it.
Cool. Thanks, Gloria. 6 minutes and 50. Swifter.
Yeah, I know, I got nervous.
That's okay. And last but not least. Graham, you're up.
Good morning. I'll be talking about the Kelp Forest Pacific. Originally, I was going to do degradation, but then through further research, I realized it's not currently being degraded. It's actually under restoration right now. So kelp forests are typically called forests, but they're actually not trees. Kelp forests are a type of brown algae that can grow up to 150 feet in height, and in perfect conditions can actually grow 18 inches a day. They really thrive in cold, nutrient-rich waters, typically along coasts, as you can see in this picture. The kelp forests I'll be talking about today are the macrocytic and the Nereus-ciscus, which are the giant kelp, which is the macrocytic, and the bull kelp, which is the Nereus-ciscus. There's seven other kelp forests along the coast in the world, but just talk about this one because it's near to me, it's dear to my heart, and also like recent degradation. First thing I want to talk about is biological value of these kelp forests. One thing they provide is a very good shelter for like thousands of sea species. Kelp actually helps itself, it actually can negate the current speed, kind of similar to like vegetation within rivers can. It slows down the currents and actually provides kind of a safe haven for all these fish. As you can see, this is not even like close to the amount of species it can withstand, but it's good insight. Also want to talk about the ocean carbon sink. It can kind of serve as a kind of provider for preventing climate change. It acts as kind of like a plant of the ocean. It can bring in that CO2 through photosynthesis, and its lifespan is about a year. And so after it dies off, it'll float to the bottom of the sea, and where it'll become a carbon sequester. More recently, there's been a lot of threats due to climate change. In 2019, we experienced a massive warm blob of seawater, along with previous years of El Nino, which is another warm water current. You can see in this picture, there's just a huge density of increased sea temperature anomaly that kind of hit the north coast. And I want to specifically point out in Northern California, like Mendocino County and Sonoma County, these are the previous like kelp cover populations. Once it dies, it'll kind of rise to the surface. And so that's what's shown in the Van Dam, Point Arena Cove, Timber Cove, and Fort Ross. You can see just in a matter of 60 years, a lot of that kelp cover was lost, resulting in pretty much no cover in 2016. That kelp cover on top, it also provides like habitats to a lot of seals, a lot of whales, and many seabirds as well, because it can serve as a kind of a shelter from these hard sea storms, the hard currents. Another photo I want to talk about is the purple sea urchin. Although they are a member of the habitat, they actually have pretty devastating impacts on the sea kelp. And with more recent years, a lot of these warm sea temperatures kind of drive away a lot of species that need these nutrient-rich waters. But these sea kelp kind of thrive on, these sea urchins can kind of thrive on anything. And so they'll go through like thousands at a time and just kind of eat these seedlings of kelp, which kind of negates further growth of future kelp populations. And with that loss and a lot of natural predators, there was a 60% or 60 times population growth. And kind of, as I said, it leads to devastating impact on sea kelp. The conservation efforts kind of going about right now. One of them is abalone restoration, which there used to be massive populations of abalone on the California and Oregon coast, but overfishing led to a lot of it pretty much going endangered and almost out of extinct on the Pacific coast. There's been some efforts to kind of restore that population because the abalone can actually feed on the rocks that these sea kelp grapple to, and also kind of reintroduce other predators of the sea urchin. There's also been efforts to return the California sea otter to its habitat. These sea otters actually kind of feed on the purple sea urchins and kind of promote the sea kelp growth. Lastly, I'm going to talk about sustainable seafood. These purple sea urchins actually are edible. People typically, if you've had uni before, you probably ate red sea urchin. A lot of chefs don't really like the purple sea urchin because the uni itself isn't nearly as big, and so they don't really promote using it in restaurants. But in order, if we start promoting the edibility of purple sea urchins, we can actually not only kind of start a new delicacy in the United States, I think, but also kind of start a trend in sustainability. And these are my references. Thank you.
Okay. 5:22. Okay, everybody, awesome. So takes us right to 1:20, which is good. So I'll just give you a few minutes here, and we can wrap up and maybe revisit other presentations if you want to, and just do that. Okay.